Look who's back at it again. So I was trying to find a way to talk about some of my favorite games, but a big problem is everyone already made a ton of videos on them already. But I want to talk about what they have in common: environmental storytelling. This has to be one of my favorite forms of storytelling. The mystery, the atmosphere, and just the possibilities that run through your mind just looking at it. It's just an honest form of storytelling, and they put you in the shoes of the protagonist and they know just as much as you do. And sometimes you find yourself not even knowing who the character you're playing as is. Let's start with my first experience to this genre: Super Metroid. One of my favorite games of all time. If I could completely forget one game and replay it for the first time, it would be this one. Let me tell you why. When I first played the game, I didn't know anything about the Metroid universe. I just knew it was a game about aliens and this really cool main character that I found out the hard way was a woman. And I love how the game just throws you into the world, and when you first start out, there's no real music to distract you from the alien sound effects of the game. Like, you can hear Samus's footsteps, and the strange sound of her arm cannon firing, and the imposing sound of the doors opening. Those doors are my favorite detail of the game. They're so alien in appearance, design, color, and sound, and they open by shooting them. What better way to prepare the player for what's to come by having them blast through the door? That's how you know things are about to get real. Anyway, that sound when they open is so great. It doesn't sound familiar to anything in the real world, and it overpowers any noise on the screen. Then when you walk through the door, everything goes dark except for the glow of the door, and then the sudden shut, sometimes trapping you in the room with whatever it was hiding. Man, I love those things. And they're such a small detail, but I'm glad they used them to highlight the whole experience. Just look at the alien world you get to explore in this game. First thing you're greeted by is an empty field and a rainstorm, and empty caverns that echo your footsteps and shots. And even if you're not familiar with Metroid, you recognize the chamber for Mother Brain from the cutscenes from the beginning of the game. So you're convinced that this place is a wasteland and no threat to you. Then that eye sees you. It doesn't do anything to you physically and just stares at you. But your mind starts racing and panicking. Did you do something wrong? Could that have been avoided? Maybe. And when you go to the next room and everything is still quiet and empty, only to be spotted again. Yeah, someone knows you're here. And only after re-entering the empty chamber do you realize that the space pirates know you're here and have all sorts of surprises waiting for you. This is so great. Not a word was said. And even if you don't understand the area you're in, the opening cutscene gave you the information you needed. And each area of the game seems to have so much history to it. Like when you're underwater and the background has these strange ruins in it, like you discovered some sort of lost city. Or when you're in Ridley's area and the music intensifies to let you know that you're in the wrong neighborhood. Because down here, things are getting real and you have to fight this world's champions in this strange looking Rome area. And then the last area of the game returns you to no music, and there's only ambient sounds just to catch you off guard for what you're about to face. This game is a masterpiece, and it had one of the most iconic cutscenes in-game, and not a single word was spoken. The whole game felt like a cinematic experience through and through. So my question to you now is, that game is 30 years old. Has anything else captured that same feeling? Of course. And I'm not just talking about other Metroid games that came after Super Metroid or, Metroid Prime. But speaking of first-person shooters, I'm a huge Destiny fan, and that game has all sorts of overlooked stories all over its various worlds. Like, let's look at Earth on the Cosmodrome. The game starts you on the outside of a giant wall. A giant wall with a huge line of cars trying to get on the other side of it. Where were these people going? And what were they running from? A mystery for sure, but when you enter the wall, you are immediately attacked by a hostile alien species. Then you're told they are fallen. Fallen from what? Another question that gives you a clue for the first question. Then as you explore further into the Cosmodrome, you find out there's a space program here centuries ago. There are plane and shipyards on opposite sides of the map. That must have brought supplies and people to this area. A giant satellite dish that has the most concentration of enemies in it, Probably because this area was the most important for the communications and knowledge. And most importantly, in the middle of the map are the spaceships that are still there. Were the people outside the wall coming to the Cosmodrome to flee from an unknown threat? And the rockets were their ticket out of there? But we know that didn't happen, and the rockets and the bodies are still there. The Earth and the Moon are my favorite places to explore in Destiny before the sequel came out. Both locations are in the sequel, but they are updated to reflect the current state of the game, so all the history of the locations are getting overridden. Like when the Moon came back in Destiny 2, it went all in on being the Hive headquarters. In Destiny 1, the Moon had a haunted feeling about it, and I mean the real haunted feeling. When you were on the surface of the Moon, you were fighting Fallen and exploring abandoned space stations. Then, when you went under the surface, that's when you found the Hive in the rotting center of the giant rock. You could see that Earth did its best to save the Moon, but on the surface it looks normal, but underneath the enemy was there and waiting for its chance to strike. Destiny had a big job to do. It had to explain a mass extinction level event throughout the entire solar system. And it's no secret the story for Destiny 1 was gutted in favor of shady business practices, but the original story is still there in the minor details of the environments. The untold, war torn, forgotten landscapes still tell the original story in a way words could never describe, and ultimately failed to do. Being a wandering, no name soldier in an empty solar system full of hostile alien threats sounds like the storyteller's playground, but now the shift in narrative and gameplay has covered up all those mysteries. And after years of speculation and having our imaginations run wild, it feels like the answers to our questions could never have lived up to the expectations we created for ourselves. It's sad to see this little experiment in real time. The Destiny community has taken many hits and lost many fans, but I think the worst crime is no one wants to see how this story comes together after almost a decade. Like I said, the years of theories and speculation has set the bar so high, no experienced storyteller could ever have reached it. It was always destined to fall short. I'm not apologizing for that pun. So, what about a game that got this idea right? What about a smaller scale world in a post apocalyptic Hyrule rich with story elements? That's right, we're talking about Breath of the Wild. Another banger from Nintendo that plays on the strength of their little to no narrative storytelling and uses the environment to tell the story. Like, this game is beautiful and understands its longtime fans, and tries its best to subvert your expectations. Like how the first building you run into is the ruins of the Temple of Time, with a rusted garbage sword posing as the Master Sword. You quickly find out the rules are different here, and after a tutorial on them and a quick story time with the deceased king, you are set out into the world. From there, you traverse the world that is on life support from Ganon's onslaught over the years. I'll never forget what I first thought when I found Hatino Field, and thought, man, what epic battle happened here, as I scavenged the remains of the Guardians. I was very surprised to find out that those Guardians were there because how awesome Link used to be, before I got one shot by bogoblins. And man, I was excited to finally find another human for the first time and actually find a real settlement. Those are so far and few that it's always a relief to find one and get a break from the hostile world you have to traverse. And I do enjoy the fact that the myths and legends of the world are built into the landscape. Like when you hear a folk song or rumor from an NPC that actually solves a puzzle out in the world. It really helps bring the world to life and gives some history rather than being a randomly generated location. The Zelda series has always been great with mixing cultures with their locales, and the Breath of the Wild was a rare case where they could reference themselves for world building. When you look at the map, you could see the references to other games like Lon Lon Ranch, Eventide Isle, or Elden from Twilight Princess, which I'm told Breath of the Wild's map is 140 square miles, which is crazy to think they could fit so many references to their previous games in a map that huge. Where the game lacked in any groundbreaking storytelling, it made up for environmental storytelling and rewarding the player for exploring. Sometimes the reward for finding a secret location with an Easter egg was better than beating a scripted dungeon in the actual main quest. And with all the things to explore, unless someone is a completionist or owns no other games, I'm sure the player got tired playing the game well before finding all of it. Which is a shame. There could have been another gem they could have uncovered by exploring just a bit more. But what are you going to do? At least a game like that is full of content and the player can choose when to continue the story when they feel like it. So at the end of the day, is it our job to tell the stories ourselves in these games? No. I believe there are many forms of storytelling, and each has its strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes the environmental storytelling is too slow, requires too much time to invest in it, or leaves things up to too much interpretation, misses the mark. Not really bad things, but I can see how people would prefer to have the story told directly, and linear stories tend to be more exciting, with scripted action sequences, plots, and relationships. However, I do appreciate the art of storytelling, and I believe the world building is just as important as having a moral or purpose to a story. So, to have the subtlety of a world bigger than your character really puts things into perspective. It makes it feel so real. And as for me, I love to find things like this and just imagine the possibilities. Like when I was a kid playing Ocarina of Time, I remember running into that tree at Lake Hylilia and just losing my mind over those giant scratch marks. Like, what could have caused those? When could they have happened and what does it mean? The mystery was so fun and I loved coming up with so many theories of what happened. I think I came up with some sort of giant bear creature was chained to the tree on that island. I love that stuff. And I think deep down you do too. The adventure may come to an end, and we might have run out of side quests to do. But when we look around and appreciate the details, we can let our imaginations run wild. The story continues through us, and months and maybe even years down the road, we can share our theories and opinions with fellow fans and keep these adventures alive. Thanks for stopping by, and please leave your thoughts in the comments. Till next time.